Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Life of Riley's May webinar. To those of you who've been a part of our virtual events in the past, it's great to see you back. And for those of you who are here for the first time, welcome to our community. Life of Riley is the animal welfare initiative of Spring Point Partners, a social impact organization investing in the leaders and networks championing community-driven solutions. My name is Chaitana. I am the Chief Grants Officer at SpringPoint, and I'm also the Program Director for Life of Riley. Today's presentation by JVR Strategies is actually a continuation of the presentation they first gave at Life of Riley's virtual conference last October. Designed for people looking holistically at the landscape for companion dogs in the United States, particularly dogs used for breeding, the JVR Strategies team provides insight into the complexity and the diversity of the communities and individuals breeding dogs for profit and offer us an approach to addressing the animal welfare challenges associated with dog breeding that is rooted in understanding and relationship. Our speakers today are Dr. Jyoti Robertson, Robin Vincent, Janelle Griffith, and Heather Camissa. Their full bios will be linked in the follow-up email. But as I said when I introduced them at our virtual conference last year, this team approaches complex animal welfare problems with sophistication, nuanced thinking, patience, and the mindset to listen deeply to diverse stakeholders and co-create solutions. Our presenters actually have a very interactive presentation planned for you today, so I hope you're in the mood to participate. Just one quick note before I pass this on to the JVR team. In a second, I'll drop a link to Life of Riley's values in the chat box. Everyone here cares about animals and wants to make the world a better place for people and for animals. Not one of us does this work perfectly, least of all me, because we're all human. And Life of Riley's virtual convenings are a space for us to share ideas and learn from each other and do better and grow. So when we're giving and receiving feedback or sharing ideas, please do so thoughtfully, respectfully, kindly, and in the spirit of friendship and collaboration, because we are all part of the same community. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Jyoti to introduce today's session. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Chaitana. That was wonderful. Let me go ahead and get my screen share up. Well, welcome everyone and hello. Today we're going to be talking about breeder categories, and we began this work originally back in October and even earlier than that. Heather, can you go ahead and take us to our first slide? I'm going to start us off by just setting the tone. Okay, all of us are coming here to this conversation with many different viewpoints. As you've likely already noticed in the chat and by reading names of participants, there are people from very diverse backgrounds and opportunities here, coming from within the dog breeding space, from animal welfare, from industry, from many different areas to this conversation. So I invite all of you to set an intention of being open and curious. This is an opportunity to have conversations newly. It will be highly interactive, as Chaitana said. We'll have two longer breakout groups and the ability to have some nice discussion as well. So really, this is a starting point for conversations. And in order to have a starting point for conversation, we need shared language. And that is what this presentation is about. Heather, can you take us to the next slide, please? Yeah. So our view is that for us to even begin to do whatever work we're doing within this space, we need to all come to terms in how we discuss the language. How we think about different communities, how we think about dog breeding might be varied, but having some shared terminology, shared views can be really helpful to starting dialogue, regardless of what angle we're coming from. So today, for us to set the context, I am not the primary speaker. We have three speakers, Robin Vincent, Janelle Griffith, and Heather. And Heather will be starting us off by setting the context for our work together. So please keep that open curiosity and tension. Heather?
So setting the context, we wanted to start off by just taking a moment and talking about data and puppy acquisition. Um, you know, numbers we talked about in our earlier presentation. And at the time that we did this work, very little was known about the source of puppy acquisition. And the reason for that was sort of threefold: very different regulations and data collection across the country when it comes to kennel licensing, reporting, tracking. The surveys that were out there, the questions were not really distinct. So if someone was asked, did you get your dog from friend, family, neighbor? That friend, family, neighbor could have been a breeder. So, and then mostly it was because the question was, where did you get your dog? And so we had dogs and puppies. There was one survey that talked about where'd your dog come from when it was a puppy? And a lot of people didn't know. So thankfully, and Joyce is here and she's joining us today from Spain. I saw it in the comments, so she'll win the prize for longest distance attendee. Um, Joyce Briggs and Val Benka had put out a presentation here with Life of Riley. Thank you so much for the research, asking specifically about puppy acquisition. But all of this, what has been covered already. What we wanted to sort of do as a leveling up with some context was there's a lot that there's a lot of breeding happening, millions of puppies to meet the demand for dogs that is not well, it certainly isn't homogenous. We haven't really broken down the context around these environments and index that with counts of animals in each of these environments, and really diving into understanding variation in these environments. And so, why does this matter? Context certainly influences the decision making of the people doing the breeding, people that are working in this space, having a shared understanding of the context in which the breeders are operating, whether it's regulatory, ambiguity in regulatory environments, motivations, challenges, that one approach does not fit all in terms of engaging with breeding. And so with that context, it builds an understanding, it builds investment and engagement with these communities to really meet the demand for puppies, which is huge in our country. And again, we talked about the numbers in earlier presentations, in the most ethical way. And that's what opportunity is given to us when we put more context to it than very blunt descriptions. So I'm going to turn it over to Robin to talk a little bit about how we got to the framework.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. So I'm just going to spend just a quick minute talking about how we developed these categories of breeders. And Heather, can you go to the next slide? So in the beginning of our work, as Jyoti might have mentioned earlier, our team approached this from a research perspective. We were doing a landscape analysis. Our goal was to better understand really all the aspects of the breeding industry, but specifically the range of breeders that exists within this really, really broad system. So we didn't start with these categories to begin with, which I think is really important to note. We didn't start with any predefined categories for that matter. We actually started with just talking to people. And that included breeders and brokers operating at different scales in different regions and with different cultural and operational contexts. We talked with animal welfare professionals, USDA officials, retail store owners, and I am sure there's others in there I'm forgetting. But our team, we also did breeder site visits and various industry events, and of course, some really, really riveting research, literature, and regulatory reviews, which definitely riveting. And what came from all of that listening were these stories. So Heather, can you go to the next slide? And as we continued comparing experience and observations across different breeders and in different parts of the industry, we started seeing some reoccurring themes. From there, we kept refining those patterns through more conversations and comparisons. And that's really how this framework emerged. So we're going to get into sharing the categories or breeder buckets as they somehow came to be called on our team. But first, I wanted to be really, really clear about what these categories are and what they aren't. In general, anytime you try to organize a complex system into categories, there is going to be overlap. There are going to be gray areas, and there are going to be things that exist way out in left field. And these categories are no different. Our team, we don't see these buckets as definitive. They are not intended to neatly capture every breeder or every lived experience. They are intended to be useful as a shared reference and a starting point to have more conversations. One of the challenges we kept running into with our research was that people were often using the same terms to mean different things or different terms to mean the same things, and that can make conversations really difficult, right? So part of the value of these buckets is simply that it gives us shared language to work from. And one more thing that I would like to mention before we get into the buckets is, or categories, excuse me, is that for those of you who were at our presentation last fall, you might remember that as part of this framework, we also presented levels of care, a levels of care scale that acknowledge the range in care or the levels of harm that we saw within operators in this industry. We are not going to be talking about that part of the framework today. Our observations in this work are that where an operator might land on that scale, high levels of care, low levels of care, it is completely independent of what bucket they might be categorized in. That is to say, every single bucket has individuals operating at all points of this range of care. So we're not going to get into that. What we really, really want to do is just talk about the buckets today. So now I will pass this back to Heather to talk about this framework.
Thank you, Robin. So we're going to, before we start discussing individual buckets and that Robin mentioned, we have two dimensions. That's my cat saying hello to everyone. Two dimensions that we broke this down. And so really understanding the motivations, setup, pathways of placement, and challenges by each breeding. And that sort of helped inform these breakouts. And then reach, if we want to talk about ways to engage with these communities and constraints to that reach and engagement. So quickly, under motivation, including, what are the beliefs, the values, the goals of the breeding operation with setup, what kind of structure, environment, labor participation, pathways to placement, is it direct to consumer? Are there other vehicles involved? What are then challenges to this group? And again, we'll talk about details of those under each group. And then for reach, methods we found that connect the community, that offer dialogue opportunities, demonstrate goodwill, offering a hands up and venues for engagement. when we levers that work, certainly that would be what factors, incentives, relationships, structures are most likely to resonate within a particular breeder segment, and constraints to reach. So that might hamper a group's ability to engage in high FER, high IST, ethical participation. So these are the buckets that we are going to go through today. We'll go through buckets 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to have some breakout and conversation, and then 4, 5, and 6. So please know that, and I'll bring this up again when we go through bucket number 3, that there will be an opportunity to talk through buckets 4, 5, and 6, which may be felt missing talking about bucket 3 otherwise. So talking about large scale, and we'll take a moment and talk what large scale may or may not mean. And then breeding done in the Amish, or as sometimes discussed, plain breeder community. And I'm going to just move my Polly Kitty here. Originally, we had talked about trying to set a specific number for large versus small. We had offered a specific number. We've had conversations with people who say that number, it's too low, it's too hard, but no one really wants to put that number. So we've evolved on this. I would say for this discussion today, it's thinking this is not a home-based, modest kennel situation. This is a larger, intense activity. So under motivation here, and why certainly we felt this group was one to think about and put context to on its own, was that there's somewhat of a unique intergenerational community-based motivation around breeding. And again, this is not a homogenous group. As Robin was saying, there's, when we talked about, the ethical standards or different harm measurements, that everything is represented in every one of these groups. But as a category, there is a unique opportunity here with this breeder type having, that community perspective and that intergenerational well-being perspective. So, what's motivation? That community, the self-sufficiency, the family livelihood. The operational environment, often very farm-based. Labor is often family, in terms of even children, very much participating in the care of the animals. And there can be a lot of pooling of resources for an assistance with construction. So facilities can be far more affordable to build and plan because of the participation of others in the community in that. Pathways to placement, though, can be unique in this community with some ideological barriers to technology. And so often very much a reliance on other parties and venues for placement of the puppies. And for challenges, there's, again, that sometimes limited technology, maybe cultural discomfort with external oversight, some stigma, which I think we put as a challenge, and a constraint for engagement, and that there are really few transparent mechanisms to distinguish higher care operators in this group. So again, there was sufficient context here to differentiate this group as a breakout based on some of the factors that we talked about. To us, we're going to get your feedback. Then we would have large scale non-Amish plain breeding. So we're calling that English breeders, and sometimes that is prescribed. And I'm sorry, I think I skipped over some of the reach. So I'm going to go back very quickly. I think I discussed it a little bit. So ways to engage with this community, very much a peer approach from within the community. is a very viable and important way to do that. Certainly leaning into community pride and community sustainability, offering practical husbandry upgrades, and then some constraints with reaching this community is that technology, and certainly preference for trusted voices. So, and then again, just accessing some resources, use some technology and other community, not isolation, but a little bit more difficult to reach. So I'm sorry, back to large scale English. Okay, so for motivations, certainly business viability and growth as a motivation for for breeding. Investments certainly tied to sort of market access. And certainly there may be specific family intergenerational motivations as well, but a little bit more specific to the family themselves versus a community-wide intergenerational approach. The operational environment, very varied, but a purpose-built, adapted facility may have some more hired staff. And primary channels for placement is really mixed here. Maybe a broker, retail, online, and direct to consumer, but certainly more digital engagement than plain peers. And some challenges here is, capital hurdles for investment to improve facilities, let's say, as an example. And that might be something where it's maybe an older couple or family breeding. Will they have enough, runway to recoup the investments in facility upgrades, as an example? And sometimes in this community, there's real dependence on intermediaries. And then as far as reach, ways to engage might be to address that issue, maybe some, financial tools, like loans or grant programming, staging standards, offering training on husbandry or reproduction. Levers that work is certainly helping with clarity around clear market signals to help people adapt appropriately, and reducing the friction for incremental improvements. Constraints, certainly cash flow, workforce, contract obligations can certainly limit flexibility as well. Okay, we're going to go through one more and then go to breakout. Here we would say small scale breeders, but this is still very much intentional breeding. This isn't, some of the other categories we're going to talk about, like you might think of service dogs and heritage breeders and so forth. So this is certainly supplemental or primary income as a motivation. Might be a little bit more of a home-ish space with less formal routines and less formal sort of training. Primary channels, a little bit more direct to public placement, either direct or online. And some challenges here are certainly that there isn't really cohesive guidance, a higher per animal cost, regulatory ambiguity, and that is an issue onto its own. That could be an entire presentation. Very differing federal, state, local zoning laws, tax laws. Does the IRS view this as a hobby, or is it a business if you've lost money for so many years? A lot of state differentials on what's a hobby kennel, what's a commercial pen. So a lot of ambiguity. And there is, again, very low ability for consumers to differentiate care levels if they are high versus low. So with that, reach, I did it again. All right. In terms of reaching and engaging with this community, certainly, opportunities perhaps through local veterinarians, animal welfare infrastructure for low barrier education, maybe even some programs that support this community, whether that's, vaccine, checklists, supportive operational tools, levers that could work, maybe clear tax, consumer regulatory thresholds and programs, as well as operational toolkits and supportive materials, constraints, very much cost sensitivity. And there is a trust factor, and there's a trust factor right across all these spaces. But reducing fear by clarity could be very powerful. Okay, so now, hopefully we are on time. We are going to break out into groups. There will be a facilitator in each group that will take notes, unless someone else in the group would like to tap their fingers away. And we're going to take about 16 minutes. We will have another breakout, thank you, James, at the end of the next 3 buckets. So we will have a chance to talk about other reading types there. And we certainly want to hear back from you. So with that, I believe everyone is going to be put into the breakouts. Again, we have about 16 minutes there, and then we will come back. We will not have time to report out. These documents will be shared.
Hopefully you're all had some good conversations. I'm going to be sharing my slides again, and now we'll be introducing Janelle Griffith in to speak. So give me just one moment while I share.
Thanks, Jyoti. So we're going to go into the next 3 buckets, and I'm sure everybody had in the discussion that it's very hard to put things into just 6 buckets. So the next one we're going to talk about is the niche breeders. So this is the group that we kind of considered, they're a small group, but very important. They have on the broader breeding landscape. These are the breeders that are the preservation breeders. They're the breeders who have the working dogs, the service dogs. They're kind of breeding for function and history and the impact rather than volume or profits. Motivation, a lot of times with breeders, it's strongly purpose-driven. I'm sure you guys know a lot of preservation breeders and working dog breeders. They view themselves as the caretaker of the breed history, right? The genetics, the health, the temperament, the function, all of that stuff is really important. The programs are guided by long-term goals, such as preserving the breed, integrity, maintaining genetic diversity, and producing dogs capable of specific work or service roles. In many cases, these breeders help shape breed standards and model high intentional breeding practices. A lot of the breeding setup is these are usually small scale, right, at home based, and they're often intentional in design. The facilities are structured around safety, cleanliness, and enrichment. For working or service dog programs, the environment may also include early training and temperament testing to prepare dogs for the future roles. Placement is usually direct placement, right? This is directly into homes, directly into whatever program maybe the service dog is going to. There tends to be longer wait lists to attain a puppy from this breeding category. Oftentimes, there are contracts signed before placement, especially around breeding rights. And then there's lifetime support for this dog that kind of includes that placement. Some of the challenges, this group can be a bit harder to enter as the higher cost of entry, since these breeders are generally very meticulous about health screening, genetic testing, and orthopedic certifications. While standards of care, of course, can be very different, like in any of the groups, there's still internal variation. But there's also this tight-knit club and professional circles that can create barriers to newcomers trying to make it can make it a little difficult to get into the group. And also, there's an uneven vet familiarity with animal reproduction, and then also adhering to regulations, right? So local, state regulations, and also the IRS parameters. I think some of the ways to engage that we've discovered was recognition for their work and incentives, right? Like grants and awards for their contributions to the breed preservation. Continuing education could be another way to for breeders and for vets, creating structured mentorship programs and apprenticeship programs to participate in or facilitate, lowering the barrier for entry for new breeders. Some of the levers that can work. In our research and conversation with breeders in this category, we found this group really cares about reputation and shaping how the brand or kennel or program is perceived among not only peers, but also potential clients, making this a lever or tactic. Partnerships with service or working dog programs and organizations is another lever. Government contracts, of course, we know that a lot of the government will get their military dogs from very specific breeders. Policy clarity and guidance would also help. The purpose-driven breeders are classified under, or on how purpose-driven breeders are classified under tax and business laws, including which rules, protections, and legal requirements apply to their operations. Some constraints. There's a limit on how many dogs that can be on one's property, right? So that's where we start hitting that borderline. They are not able to compete also on pricing with large scale or small scale breeders, which can actually make it difficult for buyers to justify higher costs. And this is without the strong understanding of the breed's value proposition, right? There's a higher barrier of participation since high standards are maintained through informal mentorships and also long-standing relationships. Our next bucket of breeders is community breeders. So this is a very loosely defined category. These are typically the people who breed dogs for personal or local reasons. It's not really a formal business. Some only breed once, while others will continue to breed if they have a positive experience or maybe the family requests more. Family and friends request more. Their decisions are often shaped by more of a personal relationship and circumstance rather than by profit. But they play a really important role in how puppies enter our communities and households. I'm sure most of you saw Joyce Briggs' wonderful presentation, and some of the data she collected shows that 21% of puppies come from a group considered not a breeder. So motivations, breeding decisions in this group are often driven by sentiment, curiosity, social influence. Owners may believe the dog has desirable traits they want to share with others, while interest from friends or family may reinforce breeding. You also have the people they love their dogs so much they want more of them. Some litters are unplanned due to unaltered pets, and positive experiences or demand may lead to repeated breeding. Financial gain may be a factor, but motivations are often rooted in personal attachment and sharing the compassion their dogs provide. Setup, again, wide variety. Operationally, the breeders work entirely from home. Puppies are often raised in living rooms, garages, backyards, rather than purpose-built spaces. Care and attention can be high in terms of affection, but inconsistent in structure. Things like sanitation, early socialization, and preventive health care may vary widely depending on the breeder's knowledge and their resources. Placement, most puppies from this group are placed through personal networks, right? Word of mouth, online platforms like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. Transactions are informal and oftentimes without contracts, health guarantees, or return options. That means buyers have little protection if health or behavioral issues might emerge. Challenges with this group, because most community breeders don't see themselves as breeders. They're going to rarely seek education, guidance, or support. They operate outside of economic and regulatory systems, and typically without business registration, tax collection, or consumer protections. Again, they're not thinking about this because they're not breeders. This informally makes it difficult to offer assistance or introduce improvement efforts in ways that feel relevant or accessible. With Reach, some ways to engage. Supporting community breeders requires non-judgmental engagement and accessible community-based resources. Effective strategies can include, education on basic animal care, socialization, accidental litters, through have low-cost services. There needs to be clear regulatory guidance. Also helps to find when breeding activity transitions from a business subject to consumer protections and legal requirements. Some of the levers that might work with engaging is simple, accessible resources at touch points, right? You at where they go to their vet, maybe the shelters that they go to, community events, making it very accessible for them to reach. Some constraints, it's limited time and financial resources, right? Along with lower awareness of critical development periods, preventative care needs, and potential health and behavioral risk associated with breeding and early puppy development. And our last breeder bucket is what we decided to call custom breeders. Um, this is kind of a growing segment of dog breeding, and it's not exact. They could honestly fit into every single one of the categories, and that's why they kind of have their own category. So they're focused on producing dogs with highly specific aesthetic traits, often influenced by social media trends, branding, and community preferences. Common traits are exaggerated in size. They like the rare colors, the non-standard body shapes, particularly in bully and brachiocephalic dogs. Their practices are typically driven by appearance, online influence, and consumer demand rather than traditional breed standards or preservation goals. Some of the motivations for custom breeders are predominantly motivated by creating legitimate income sources in their community, right? And social status can be another part of it. Identity can be a really big part of it, and branding. For some, breeding serves as a business endeavor. This is an actual way for their whole entire family and then generations to create positive income in their community. For others, it's a way to express identity. There's a lot of, I will say, there's like a whole appearance, right? It's just like, it's the way you dress. It's the whole thing package. It's not just the dog. It becomes their entire identity. And it also, aesthetic preferences also shape them. What attracts attention, what people want is a really big driver of what they will breed. And financial incentives, of course, in building their brand. Setup can be very, very different across the board. Some breeders operate in high-end home environments with access to veterinary care and premium vet resources. Others have limited infrastructure or husbandry knowledge. Care practices, facility setups, and breeding approaches are inconsistent and often shaped by aesthetics, presentation, and peer influence. So puppies can be raised in a kennel, they could be raised in a home, or they could be raised in any type of temporary setup. Placement. These breeders operate primarily direct to consumer channels through social media, local shows, and in informal online platforms. This is kind of one reason why this breeding group stood out is it's mostly social media based and very word of mouth and local. Branding is key with kennel names. It's really important what their kennel looks like, their logos, the merchandise that comes with them. Puppies are often sold based on appearance and rarity. So this could be your Merle Frenchie with long hair. Contracts and buyer screening practices are different, of course, and it can vary significantly from breeder to breeder. There's also little clarity of long-term supported that's provided. Challenges. These breeders operate in a rapidly changing market, and it is really truly shaped by social trends, right? There is a low barrier to entry and limited oversight. Shifts in consumer demand can encourage high volume breeding focused on short-term profit, creating challenges for breeders prioritizing health and welfare. There's inconsistent regulation, and sometimes they don't know the regulations, particularly from online or unlicensed sellers. And this creates uneven conditions, and ethical breeders are often face higher costs related to veterinary care facilities and proper socialization. Ways to engage. This group is very specific in culture. So culturally grounded outreach through trusted community figures, veterinarians, and events. Educational efforts should be focused on health impacts of these exaggerated traits. There has to be some sort of incentives, collaboration with veterinary professionals, and open dialogue across breeder communities can support the development of practices that balance the welfare of the animal, but also cultural identity and their community values. Levers that work, it has to be peer to peer, definitely peer to peer. There has to be building trust, and it has to approach with a cultural understanding of what is happening in this breeding category. The lead figure in the community is can drive the narratives and campaigns on health impacts. And some of the constraints, it's pressure to prioritize appearance over longevity. There's also skepticism towards traditional institutions that have been in dog breeding because there has been a lack of acceptance in traditional institutions for many, many generations. So another constraint is it's unpredictable and sudden fluctuations in demand. And now that you've learned that 3 buckets, we're going to go back into our breakout to discuss the 3.
We just wanted to thank everybody for showing up today and being willing to have these conversations. This is where it starts, right? This is the important coming together, having conversations with each other and building this language. And thank you so much to Springport Partners and Chaitana for the opportunity to bring us all together and to keep having these conversations that are so productive and so constructive to our industry. We really appreciate the chance to talk today.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Jyoti, Robin, Janelle, Heather, for sharing with us today. Thanks to everyone on the call for being part of the Life of Riley community. We are going to have a bit of a summer break before our next webinar, which will be in August. And while it's somewhat of a shift in topic, it's still relevant to everyone on this call because we all care about that human-animal bond. We are very lucky. Adam Gordon from the Fair Housing Center in New Jersey and Ross Barker from Michelson Found Animals will share some emerging opportunities in the affordable housing space that will help keep pets and families together. So I hope you'll join us then. You'll get more information on this pet-friendly housing webinar in upcoming mailings. So keep your eyes open for the follow-up email to this webinar. Hopefully we'll have some notes from the breakout discussions, but also the recording for this webinar, which is great. And then the registration for the August webinar on pet-friendly housing. So thank you again for joining us. I hope you all have a really great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
And please don't go yet. Here is a QR code, and I swear the survey is so short. So please take a picture and fill out a survey. We would love that.